It's Deprogrammed, the podcast where we try to get you into a band. I'm still figuring this one out. My name is Justin, and you could call me Band Curious because I am indeed curious about bands and artists, and I like to gather my friends together, and in doing so, we will come up with a top 10 starter kit in case you have never heard of said artist. That's what we normally do here. As I mentioned yesterday on the pod, and if you are a patron, then you heard on After the Fact, after Avril Lavigne, it's 10 years of Deprogrammed, almost exactly. So I thought this would be a good place to kind of reflect on 10 years of Deprogrammed, and specifically the very first year. And anyone who's not in the know, so Deprogrammed was literally an attempt. So it was a radio show at first. We started our own online radio station in 2016 called Radio Free Radio. And we were trying to come up with just shows. And initially it was like all shows of the founders. Like it was myself, Matt, and a guy that we don't mention here anymore. Pretty much the three of us doing whatever, and then, us spawning off and doing whatever shows. So the three of us had Good Morning You Drunks on Mondays, and then we each kind of took, an hour at some point in the rest of the week. Matt had Joystick Syndicate, which was like a video game show, popped with Keith and Sarah actually they were on Tuesdays as well. And then the three of us also did Wrestle Pals, which ended up being just me and the other guy. Matt would often fall asleep and go back inside. So, that was the genesis of it. And we were trying to fill out time slots, and, I just started kicking around ideas for myself. And stumbled on what if we had a conversation where we were just coming up with a top 10 playlist, initially. And, I came up with the name Deprogrammed, just kind of bouncing stuff. And Matt was like, that's the one. And so that's how it began. And my initial thought when I tossed it out there was that it was just going to be until more people came in on board to the station and could take that time slot. But people kind of gravitated towards it and really liked the show. And even in that early iteration, really enjoyed what we were doing. And so here we are 10 years later, still doing it. It spawned off of radio show into a pod, and we'll talk about that as we go. But we're specifically here to talk about that first year. And so it was in the studio clubhouse, which was in Matt's garage in his backyard. And so this would have been like late February or March 1st. I'm pretty sure it was March 1st, landed on a Tuesday that year. Yeah, because March 28th was Good Morning You Drunks and Wrestle Pals. We launched the Monday, and the very next day was Popped, I think, was before us, and then Deprogrammed. Actually, it may have been Popped, and then Darius's show. Oh no, I can't remember it. Dang it. But it was a news show, and Dead Week, that's what it was called, Dead Week. And then Deprogrammed was 10. Lucky me. Or was it? Yeah, maybe. Regardless. So Tuesday comes along, and initially Smashing Pumpkins was supposed to be myself, Daniel Forlines, and David Henretta from Alpha Whale, Sons of Godzilla, if you were local. And David bailed that day. And what should have happened was, because Dan and his lovely wife Coriona came over, and I should have had her on the show, quick goat thinking, I should have just had her on the show. And I didn't even think about it. I just assumed she wasn't a fan because she didn't sign up, and all of everything was different then. Like, I was thinking more of, let me just get the show on the air versus whatever the show was going to become. And I butchered her name. I think I called her Corlina or something. Awful, awful, awful. Yeah. So, the show had to happen that way for the show to exist. So, like, regret wouldn't be a word that I would use. But the Pumpkins, the way I approached my list would definitely change now. Like, I definitely tried to go to B-side heavy and try to be that guy at the start instead of what would become the show. I think even by later that year, like the idea of let's try to turn somebody on to the band, as opposed to, it's like, I approached it initially, especially on that episode, of not necessarily trying to out fan, but like definitely trying to out fan. Like, I let off with Set the Radio Jerry, and hey, look, like, it is one of my favorite Smashing Pumpkins songs for sure. And I think, now that Championship Edition exists, Set the Radio Jerry belongs in the conversation. But if I'm trying to turn somebody on to the Smashing Pumpkins, I'm not going to give them Set the Radio Jerry. As much as I love it, there's songs that can do the trick much, much better. Did not do it there. And then, so Local 8. So the funny thing is, like, initially the idea was just to do bands that I already loved. Again, because I didn't think that it had legs. I didn't think it was going to do anything. And my wife pretty immediately is like, yeah, you're going to run out of bands that you know. And I was like, yeah, but even if I do, the show won't exist by then. I was thinking there's 50 episodes. Like, there's no way, like, I'm going to get that far. And she was right. And I mean, in that first year, like, the first discovery I did was Devo. And that probably was April or May. And from the time I put on Girl You Want, I was like, oh, okay. There is another layer to what this show can be. Again, some of the first episodes we did were like some of my favorite bands, Pumpkins, Local H, Weezer, Weird Al, Radiohead. Like, all bands I was pretty well familiar with. Foo Fighters. Foo Fighters was Jenny's first episode. All stuff that the Presidents of the United States of America, which was cool because I stopped at Pure Frosting, and then I got to learn about Love Everybody, and that one kind of changed my perception. I loved that record. So a lot of that kind of stuff happening early on in the show's existence. We did our very first ever Please Explain. I made my wife explain Hanson to me, and unfortunately that was in July in the studio clubhouse, so it was hot. I remember we came back from vacation to record it, or no, it was before vacation because I was going to be in New York, so we recorded it earlier that day to air when we would normally be live. And my wife had to basically had to carry the weight of the show because it was a Please Explain, and so, like, I wasn't going to go to bat for any Hanson songs. Like, that just wasn't going to happen. At the time I only liked one, so we had that year. We did the Beastie Boys that year, and Bob France came on and just held court, and knew the deal, and really kind of swung hard for the Beasties, which was cool. We did Blur that year, and we did Oasis that year, and same thing. Bob got mad at us because Jessica and I were both like trying to go for these like deeper cuts and anything after Morning Glory, and Bob was just not having it, which was fun. We did Steely Dan that first year, and to this day I've not gone back to Steely Dan, and that used to be the the flag bearer of I'm never going to listen to them again. And I'm sorry I smacked right there. I have not had enough water. I apologize for the mouth noises. I have not gone back to them, but I'm much softer on Steely Dan now that I'm well deep into this show. Steely Dan is not the most egregious thing we've done, and I'm much more likely to go back and listen to Steely Dan nowadays. So, what else happened that year? Kanye, I think we did Kanye that first year. I'm going to just kind of bring up my list here. And yeah, Local H, Weezer, Insane Clown Posse happened that year. ICP is something I would love to do a championship edition for. Blink-182, which was just Joe and I. And again, you have the thing that happened frequently then was there was a set time that we had to do the show. Like it was a week from like every Tuesday at 10 or whatever time we were on the air had to go on. So it was just Joe and I on Blink-182. And Joe did Green Day and realized he didn't really like Green Day all that much. We did Deftones. Joe and I also did Limp Bizkit that year. Again, just the two of us. Pixies happened that year, and we did do a list contested Pixies. If that's something you guys would like to hear on the main feed, I'm going to eventually do it anyway. But if people are like amped on that, I will prop that up to the top of the list to get in there. Primus, The Replacements, Genesis, REM, which we've since done a championship edition on, and being blown away, not knowing like there was so many of us, or there was so many songs, like not knowing where to draw the line. Yeah, Devo and Beck, which at the time felt like a bloodbath because my brother came in and like did not want to waver at all. We did Nirvana and then Weird Al, yeah. And I think, yeah, The Doors was also that first year. The Doors we did, and if you go back and listen to that, like the last 5 to 10 minutes are missing because, as we explained it, the weird naked Indian guy came through. And if you've seen Wayne's World 2, then you know what that is. If you haven't, we had technical difficulties. Yeah, see, it's listed as 33 minutes, which means it's actually almost half the show missing. And then, let's see, Kanye was actually November, which means there's more. What happened in December? Justin says inquisitively as he flips to the next page to find out. The Frogs, oh my God. The Frogs ended up essentially being a please explain because Matt didn't do the work. So I was trying to explain the Frogs to Matt. The Frogs is definitely one I'd like to, I wonder if they probably have enough for a championship edition. That would be funny. As if we did that. Let's see, Talking Heads we did that year. And the last one of the year was Outcast. So that was the year. And I mean, it was a fun year other than scheduling was a lot easier then because it was a week. I had a week to ingest these discographies and try to talk about them. And that is year one. And, I'll probably do year two, maybe next week. If you guys are interested in that, we can do year two. If not, then I'll get to it eventually. Oh, man, I went way longer than I meant to. So with that, we'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye.